you were asking me earlier about what it means to be like the first woman. And, it's funny because people still got to get used to this, right? I mean, my staff, for example, sometimes they'll show me little things that just amuse me. Like, apparently, some people love to talk about the way I laugh.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
I love your laugh.
Well, let me just tell you something. I have my mother's laugh. Oh. And I grew up around a bunch of women in particular who laughed from the belly. Yeah. They laughed. They would sit around the kitchen and drinking their coffee, telling big stories with big laughs. I'm never going to be, that's just, I'm not that person. And I think it's really important for us to remind each other and our younger ones, don't be confined to other people's perception about what this looks like and how you should act in order to be, right? It's really important. It's important.
I love your laugh, and I love that message.
All right, guys, so we got to talk about this shocking but not so shocking revelation that came out during an interview with a TikToker / OnlyFans model by the name of Farah Khalidi, who is talking about how the Biden administration was paying her to engage in identity politics and to push their message, aka propaganda. And I think that this interview segment here is fascinating because it reveals something that I've been telling you guys for a long time about the Biden administration, which is that there is no organic support at all for this administration. And this is why they're having to pay these influencers to support them, because quite literally nobody likes Joe Biden and Kamala Harris. Take a look.
So you were in school, you were still in college when you started as a TikTok person, right? Or you started OnlyFans when you were in school too?
No, I started TikTok like the spring semester of my senior year, and I was like, fuck, I finally have to start applying for law school. And then like, female privilege, life is so easy for a, woman. Obviously I lucked out. I'm just kidding. I lucked out. And then, TikTok was basically full time for me. I think I was taking ads by the time I graduated college from like the Biden administration and Planned Parenthood and like dating apps and stuff. So it was like fully financially sustaining.
So you were
me.
getting, the Biden administration was buying ads from you?
Yeah, I was doing full on political propaganda.
And they would really with like what kind of like Biden created 10 million jobs this year?
Honestly. And the funny thing is they're like, do not disclose this is an ad because, they're like, technically it's not a product. So you don't have to disclose it's an ad. Because I think they just wanted like some edgy girl of color to just tell people, like when they nominated like Ketanji Brown Jackson, they're like, can you say like as a person of color, that you feel reflected? And it's like a white woman emailing this to me, and she's like giving me this script, and I'm like, no. And she's like, please. And I'm like, no, I'll like talk about the news of it, but I'm not gonna have a white person tell me to be like, this is how I feel as a person of color. Like, it's just so, I think that black-pilled me slightly on like, political propaganda stuff.
So the Biden administration sees, here's this young,
yeah, I mean, they use like a conduit. It's not like, you know what I mean? It's not Biden, but it's like a third party. You know what I mean? It's like a media company that's doing it on his behalf. I'm not blaming him for this.
Yeah. And the message is like, because you're a dark-skinned woman, you will be inspired by Ketanji Brown Jackson and all the kids should support her.
Yeah, they're like, basically as like another black person, just say that like you feel reflected by Ketanji. I'm like, no, I'll talk about like Ketanji's background and her accomplishments, but like I never, you know what I mean? Like I'm not going to say like the corny stuff. Even if it was a brown person emailing it to me, I'm like, no, that's not like how I feel. Like I don't look at like Ketanji and feel like, wow.
Yeah. So yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty hilarious, right? I mean, I'm not surprised at all because, again, I think that it's impossible to legitimately like Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, okay? I don't think that anybody that voted for Joe Biden and Kamala voted for them because they actually like them. They voted for them because they hate Trump. And that is backfiring on the Biden administration come 2024 because their base is abandoning them, okay? Their base doesn't want to vote for them for various reasons. And they're so desperate that they're having to pay OnlyFans models, who are also TikTokers as well too, to push their propaganda, to say things like, oh, as a brown woman, I'm so proud of Ketanji Brown Jackson, right? I support Biden putting affirmative action hires into his administration or on the Supreme Court because I'm a so-called person of color, right? And that means a lot to me to see people that a representative of me in the Biden administration and on the Supreme Court. Again, just straight Democrat Party talking points, okay? Nothing about this administration is real or organic at all. This is why they have to pay influencers. They have to literally hand people money to say, hey, I support the Biden administration, right? Again, anybody on TikTok that you see that is overtly pro-Biden, okay, and that is defending this administration is probably a paid shill, right? Like, there's no doubt in my mind. I mean, we already know about the Biden administration soy boys that have been exposed as paid shills.
We all know this kid, right? And how about this one? Well, as many of us have suspected for a long time, looks like those two are partisan hacks bought and paid for by the DNC to the tune of around $210,000. If you check their bios, both of them are managed by a company called Palette Media. And you might think, well, why is that important? Because Palette Media received direct payments by the DNC totaling $210,000. Apparently, the DNC didn't want to make direct payments. By the way, all of this is publicly available on the FEC website, so they don't want to make direct payments exposing Harry and his goons. So instead, they get a little creative with their accounting. First, they send the money to Palette, which then manages their talents like Harry. Now, none of this should surprise anyone because it's public knowledge that Biden started an army of social media influencers. But I guess they didn't want you to know who.
Yeah, so again, this explains why you have so many of these hardcore Biden supporters on TikTok, but yet you never see these people anywhere in real life because they don't exist in real life, okay? I'm telling you guys, I never see a Biden-Harris sign anywhere. I don't see any Biden-Harris paraphernalia. I never see it anywhere, right? Because, again, there is no organic support for these people, right? I'm just saying. And what's so hilarious about that, to me, is the fact that Kamala Harris, the reason why she was put on Biden's ticket in the first place was to get the so-called young voter base, the progressives, excited to vote for Biden, but yet people don't like her. They actually hate her, which kind of defeats the whole purpose of her being on the ticket in the first place.
Vice President Harris is taking a bigger and more prominent role in the Biden re-election campaign. This week, she's kicking off an economic opportunity tour, starting with stops in Atlanta and Detroit, that focuses on communities of color. Harris has already visited more than a dozen states this year, talking about reproductive rights and gun control. But despite being out front on those issues, interesting news, recent focus groups conducted by the super PAC Republican voters against Trump found that swing voters don't like Harris. And focus groups conducted by the Democratic National Committee also found Harris rubs some people the wrong way. So, Jonah, how big a drag is Kamala Harris on the ticket?
I think she's a pretty big drag. I think she was arguably Biden's worst political decision of his presidency to pick her in the first place. And one of the special reasons that she's a drag is Biden's age concerns people. They worry that he can't fill a term. They worry that he's not up to the job. And so the vice president matters more than they normally do. I generally think going into the future that Democrats really should not nominate or front people who come from decidedly all blue states unless they're like once in a generation talents like Barack Obama. Because Kamala Harris does not know how to talk to the center or to the right. She only really knows how to sort of speak the language of the base of the party, and that's 34% of the electorate.
Let me pick up on that, because it's not just focus groups that are down on Harris right now. In a recent poll, national poll, 40% approved of the vice president's job performance, while 55% disapproved. And Kara, to Jonah's point, given the fact that people are so worried, voters on all political stripes are so worried about Biden's age and whether he's going to last for 4 more years, is it a problem when they're not very satisfied or reassured by the person who would succeed him?
Doesn't really matter. She's not going to be replaced, and they don't like her. There's lots of reasons they don't like her, and I don't think the vice president matters as much as people think. I don't think they think about her unless...
With an 82-year-old president, it might
I get that,
more.
But right now, I don't think that's the first thing they think about is her necessarily. I just don't. I think they've not liked her. She's had not a successful vice presidency, although I don't know what that means at all, because I don't think people thought of Mike Pence very much, or Dan Quayle, or anybody else. And so it doesn't matter because she's not going anywhere. He is not going to replace her. Think about that. Think about the earthquake that would cause. And so
I think Jonah's right.
No, I think that actually really does matter. I think what you just heard there from Kara Swisher was cope. Okay, because ultimately at the end of the day, it doesn't matter who is doing the polling or the focus group, GOP or Democrat. Universally, voters don't like Kamala Harris, right? People just don't like Kamala Harris. And that most certainly matters because unlike past presidents, Biden is super old. Okay. I mean, most of our presidents have been old, but Biden is so old that it is reasonable to ask questions about whether or not Biden can make it another 4 years. Okay. And with that being said, that means that the vice president is much more important because there is a real chance that she could become president of the United States if something was to happen to Joe Biden in regards to his health. That's the reality. So it is something that people have to consider when they vote, that, hey, a vote for Joe Biden is a vote for Kamala Harris. And Kamala Harris was one of the most liberal / progressive senators while she was in office. When she was in her Senate seat, her voting record was extremely progressive. So that's what you're going to be getting if Kamala Harris becomes president of the United States. You're going to be getting a far left progressive. That's who she is. And I know there are some people who will disagree and say, oh, Kamala Harris is not that progressive. No, she is progressive. Her voting record in the Senate showed that she is very progressive. She is from the state of California, which is the most progressive state in the union. And there's no doubt in my mind that if this woman becomes president of the United States, that she's going to be a progressive president. That's what she's going to be. I mean, the whole reason for her being on the ticket is to try to get the progressive base to vote for Joe Biden, to get so-called people of color to vote for Joe Biden. And that's the hilarious part about all this, because despite her being picked for those reasons, it doesn't seem to be working, right, in 2024, because as you guys saw in that video with CNN, nobody likes her. Doesn't matter who polls the voters, Kamala Harris is universally disliked, which, again, is hilarious to think about. Because the whole point of her being picked had nothing to do with her experience, had nothing to do with her qualifications. It had everything to do with her being a so-called woman of color and having a vagina and this idea that, well, she could appeal to young people. But it seems like she's actually having the opposite effect than what was intended when they picked her to be Joe Biden's VP. She's actually turning more people off than she's getting to support Joe Biden. And that is the hilarious part about it. And I think that that's why you have the Biden administration paying these influencers to support Joe Biden, right? Because the person that's on Joe Biden's ticket, the VP, Kamala Harris, who was brought on to get people excited to have real organic support for Joe Biden, she can't do that, right? She's so disliked that, again, she's a drag on the ticket. So now you have to pay people. You have to pay people to pretend to be excited about Joe Biden and Kamala Harris because you can't organically get people to be excited about Joe Biden and Kamala, which, in my opinion, again, is a disaster. Okay. And I've said this before and I'll say it again. The biggest difference between Joe Biden and Trump is the fact that Trump has organic support. He has people that actually really like him and that support him and his policies, right? And he doesn't need to pay people to support him. Joe Biden, on the other hand, he doesn't have an organic base of supporters, right? So there's a good chance that the election is going to come down to whether or not Joe Biden's base shows up, right? Because he can't get anybody excited to vote for him. Therefore, these people probably aren't going to show up to vote. I'm just saying. I mean, that's a real possibility. And, you know, I think the writing's on the wall when it comes to the desperation that you're seeing from the Biden administration to get people excited because, again, nobody seems to like Joe Biden or Kamala Harris. And the Trump derangement, I don't think is going to work this election year because their administration has just been so bad. Let me know what you guys think. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe. Most importantly, share a Black conservative perspective. Peace.